Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Wrong Pills. Bobby Torino's hands trembled as he held his daughter Emma's limp body, her 16-year-old frame frighteningly small in his arms. The paramedics had already loaded her into the ambulance, but the image of finding her unconscious on her bedroom floor would be seared into his memory forever. I found my teenage daughter unresponsive in her room, an empty pill bottle beside her. He had told the 911 operator, panic clawing at his throat as he performed CPR until help arrived. The paramedics worked frantically, pumping life back into Emma's failing body while Bobby followed the ambulance to St. Mary's Hospital, his mind racing between terror and rage. At 52, Bobby Torino was not a man easily shaken. 20 years in the Army Rangers had taught him to compartmentalize fear, and his subsequent success building Torino Construction from nothing into a $50 million empire had only hardened his resolve. But watching his only child fight for her life shattered something fundamental inside him. Dr. Martinez emerged from the emergency room after what felt like an eternity. "She's stable," he said, and Bobby felt his knees nearly buckle with relief. "But Mr. Torino, we need to talk." The contents of this bottle. The doctor held up the prescription bottle Emma had apparently emptied. "It's not what's on the label. Detectives are on their way." Bobby's wife Cynthia, who had arrived 20 minutes after him claiming she'd been at her book club, turned pale when the police walked through the hospital doors. Detective Ray Kowalski, a heavy-set man with tired eyes, examined the pill bottle with latex gloves. "These pills are digoxin," Detective Kowalski explained. "Heart medication. But the label says they're Emma's anxiety medication, lorazepam. Someone switched them." Bobby studied his wife's face as the detective spoke. In their 22 years of marriage, he'd learned to read Cynthia's tells, the way she pressed her lips together when lying, how her left eye twitched when she was nervous. Both were happening now. "Who has access to Emma's medication?" the detective asked. "Just family," Cynthia said quickly. "Bobby, myself, and—" She paused. "Dr. Holbrook prescribed them. He's been treating Emma for anxiety since the divorce papers." She caught herself too late. Bobby's blood ran cold. "What divorce papers?" The detective looked between them, sensing the sudden tension. Cynthia's face went white. I meant to tell you. I filed last week. I was going to." "Mr. and Mrs. Torino," Detective Kowalski interrupted. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation at the station. Someone tried to poison your daughter, and we need to understand why." As they left the hospital, with Emma stable but sedated, Bobby's mind was already working. Cynthia had filed for divorce without telling him. She knew Dr. Trevor Holbrook well enough to mention him by name. And now someone had switched Emma's anxiety medication prescribed by that same doctor, with heart medication that could have killed her. The pieces were falling into place, but Bobby needed more information before he acted. In the Rangers, he'd learned that the best soldiers were patient soldiers. The ones who survived weren't the bravest, they were the smartest. His phone buzzed with a text from his business partner and former Army buddy, Mike Vasquez. "Heard about Emma. Whatever you need, brother." Bobby typed back, "Meet me at the office tomorrow. Bring your investigation contacts." As he drove home behind Cynthia's Mercedes, Bobby's jaw clenched. If his wife was involved in what happened to Emma, if she had endangered their daughter's life, he would make sure she paid a price that would haunt her for the rest of her days. Bobby Torino didn't forgive betrayal. He never had, and he never would. Chapter 2. The Soldier's Mind. Bobby sat in his home office at 3 a.m., staring at the empty space where Cynthia's wedding photo used to be. She'd removed it sometime in the past week, along with several other family pictures. The signs had been there, but he'd been too focused on expanding his business into the Seattle market to notice his own house crumbling. His background made him uniquely qualified for what was coming. Born in Boston to a construction worker father and a nurse mother, Bobby had learned early that the world was divided into those who fought for what they wanted and those who let others take it from them. His father's early death in a workplace accident when Bobby was 15 had cemented that philosophy. The Army had refined it. 2 tours in Afghanistan, a Bronze Star, and enough close calls to fill a morgue had taught Bobby that survival meant thinking 3 steps ahead of your enemy. When he'd left the service and used his veterans' benefits to start Torino Construction, he'd applied the same principles to business. By the time he was 40, he owned 3 concrete plants, employed 200 people, and had enough political connections to bid on major city contracts. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. "Mike, can't sleep either?" Mike Vasquez's voice was gravelly from cigarettes and too many late nights. "I've got our guy standing by. Jimmy Chun, works private security now, but used to do intelligence for the Bureau. He can have everything you need by noon. Everything. Bank records, phone logs, surveillance if needed. This stays between us, Bobby. No questions asked." Bobby closed his eyes. "Emma could have died, Mike." "I know, brother. That's why we're going to find out who did this." After hanging up, Bobby walked through his house, a 4,000-square-foot colonial in Belmont's most exclusive neighborhood. Cynthia had chosen every piece of furniture, every color scheme, every decorative accent. He'd paid for it all without question, working 16-hour days to give her the life she wanted. In their bedroom, he opened her jewelry box and found it nearly empty. Her grandmother's pearls, the diamond tennis bracelet he'd bought her for their 10th anniversary, even the modest engagement ring he'd scraped together money for when they were both 25, all gone. She'd been planning this for months. The next morning, Bobby met Mike at Torino Construction's main office in Cambridge. The business occupied a renovated warehouse with plate glass windows overlooking the Charles River. Bobby had built it to impress, but today the view meant nothing. Jimmy Chun arrived precisely at noon, carrying a manila folder and a laptop. He was smaller than Bobby expected, with wire-rimmed glasses and the precise movements of someone who lived in details. "Your wife filed for divorce 8 days ago," Jimmy began without preamble. "She's claiming irreconcilable differences and asking for half of everything, plus alimony. Her lawyer is Peterson, Bradford and Associates, expensive divorce specialists. How's she paying for them?" Bobby asked. "That's where it gets interesting." Jimmy opened his laptop. 3 months ago, she opened a checking account at Harbor Bank. She's deposited $47,000 in the past 2 months, all in cash. Mike leaned forward. "Where's that money coming from?" "Still working on that. But I can tell you about Dr. Trevor Holbrook." Jimmy pulled out a photograph. 48 years old, cardiac specialist at Massachusetts General. Divorced 2 years ago, paying heavy alimony to his ex-wife. He's been treating Emma for anxiety since February. Bobby studied the photo. Holbrook was handsome in a polished way, silver-haired, expensive suit, the kind of man who looked comfortable at country clubs and charity galas. Everything Bobby wasn't. Emma's anxiety started in February? Bobby asked. According to her medical records, yes. First appointment was February 14th. Valentine's Day. Bobby felt his jaw clench. What else? Your wife's been having lunch with Dr. Holbrook every Wednesday for the past 3 months. Always at expensive restaurants. Always charged to his credit card. Last Wednesday, they spent 2 hours at the Ritz-Carlton. That's the day before Emma. Mike started. Got poisoned, Bobby finished. Someone wanted my daughter dead or close to it. Jimmy closed his laptop. There's more, but I need another day to confirm it. Mr. Torino, whatever you're planning, be careful. These people are playing for keeps. After Jimmy left, Bobby sat alone with Mike in his office. Through the windows, construction crews were working on the new waterfront development, another multi-million-dollar project Bobby had secured through years of careful relationship building. What are you thinking, brother? Mike asked. Bobby was quiet for a long moment. Remember Kandahar? That Taliban commander who kept hitting our supply convoys. Mahmoud. You spent 3 weeks learning his patterns before we took him out. He thought he was smart. Thought he could hurt our people and fade back into the mountains. Bobby's voice was flat, emotionless. I never let anyone hurt my people and walk away. Mike nodded slowly. What do you need? Time to think. And when I'm ready to move, I'll need your help with some things that can't be traced back to us. You've got it. That evening, Bobby sat beside Emma's hospital bed. She was awake but groggy, her face pale against the white pillows. She looked so young, so innocent. The rage that had been building in his chest for 24 hours crystallized into something harder and colder. Dad, Emma's voice was barely a whisper. I'm here, sweetheart. I didn't try to hurt myself. I just took my medicine like always. Bobby smoothed her hair back from her forehead. I know, baby. Someone made a mistake with your pills. But Daddy's going to fix it. Emma's eyes fluttered closed again, and Bobby made a silent promise. Whoever had done this to his daughter would pay. Not just Cynthia and her lover. Anyone who had played a part in endangering Emma's life would learn what happened when you crossed Bobby Torino. In the Rangers, they had a saying, no enemy too strong, no place too distant, no vengeance too complete. Bobby intended to prove it. Chapter 3, The Deeper Betrayal. Bobby spent the next 3 days playing the worried husband and father, all while Jimmy Chin dug deeper into his wife's activities. The picture that emerged was worse than adultery. It was attempted murder with Emma as collateral damage. On Thursday evening, Jimmy called with the final pieces. Your wife and Dr. Holbrook weren't just having an affair, he said. They were planning to kill you. Bobby sat in his office after hours, the building empty except for the security guard downstairs. Explain. The digoxin that was switched with Emma's anxiety medication? It's colorless, odorless, and in the right dose, causes heart attacks that look completely natural. Dr. Holbrook's been prescribing it for himself for months, claiming chest pains. But his real medical records show a perfectly healthy heart. They were going to poison me. Gets worse. I found the real plan. Jimmy's voice was grim. Your wife's been copying files from your home office computer for months. Business records, insurance policies, bank account information. She and Holbrook have been planning this since January. Bobby felt something cold settle in his stomach. Emma wasn't supposed to take those pills. No. Based on their text messages, and yes, I got them. You were supposed to take them last Tuesday night. Your wife was going to put them in your evening bourbon, claim you'd been having chest pains, and taking Emma's anxiety medication for stress. The bourbon. Cynthia brought him a glass every Tuesday night while he worked in his study. A tradition that had started 6 months ago, right around the time she'd become more attentive, more caring. He'd thought she was trying to reconnect with their marriage. What about Emma's real medication? Bobby asked. Holbrook prescribed double the normal dose of lorazepam, knowing it would make her sleepy and disoriented. The plan was for her to find your body Wednesday morning, after the digoxin had done its work. A grieving daughter discovering her father had accidentally overdosed on her medication while trying to cope with stress. Bobby was quiet for so long that Jimmy finally asked if he was still there. I'm here, Bobby said. Keep going. The life insurance alone is worth $8 million, plus half your business assets, the house, everything. But here's the kicker. They weren't planning to wait for probate. Holbrook's been in contact with a buyer for Torino construction. They wanted to sell immediately and disappear. Who's the buyer? Meridian Development Group. It's a shell company, but I traced it back to Vincent Romano. Bobby knew that name. Romano was connected, not just politically, but in the old-school Boston way. He'd been trying to muscle into Bobby's territory for years, offering to partner on projects in ways that sounded more like threats. There's more, Jimmy continued. Your wife's been feeding Romano information about your contracts, your bids, your financial situation. The affair with Holbrook was real, but the ultimate goal was delivering your business to Romano. Bobby hung up and sat in the darkness for an hour, processing everything. His wife hadn't just betrayed their marriage. She'd sold him and their daughter to killers. Emma had nearly died because she'd accidentally taken the poison meant for him. But Emma taking those pills had saved his life and exposed the entire conspiracy. In the Rangers, they'd called that kind of luck divine intervention. Bobby preferred to think of it as opportunity. His phone buzzed with a text from Cynthia. Emma's being discharged tomorrow. I'll pick her up. Bobby typed back. I'll handle it. You focus on your book club. The response came immediately. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, sweetheart. Love you. The next morning, Bobby brought Emma home to an empty house. Cynthia had left early for what she claimed was a spa day with her sister. Bobby settled Emma in the living room with her favorite movies and made her lunch, playing the doting father while his mind worked through the final details of his plan. At 2 p.m., Mike arrived with a van and 3 of their most trusted crew members, guys who'd been with Torino Construction since the beginning, who owed their livelihoods to Bobby and would do anything he asked without questions. You sure about this? Mike asked as they stood in Bobby's driveway. They tried to kill my daughter, Mike. They tried to kill me and hand my life's work to Romano. Bobby's voice was steady, but his eyes were arctic. I'm not just sure. I'm looking forward to it. What about Emma? She'll be at her Aunt Marie's house by 6 tonight. A sleepover that'll last as long as necessary. Bobby had learned patience in the Army, but he'd also learned that when the moment for action arrived, you moved fast and you moved decisively. Cynthia and Holbrook thought they were smart, thought they'd covered their tracks. They had no idea they were walking into a trap designed by someone who'd spent 2 decades learning how to eliminate threats. That evening, as Emma laughed with her cousins at Marie's house, completely unaware of what was coming, Bobby made his final preparations. He'd built Torino construction with his own hands, turning nothing into an empire through sheer force of will. He'd survived 2 tours in Afghanistan, multiple attempts by competitors to destroy him, and the death of his parents. He wasn't about to let a cheating wife and her lover take any of it away from him. The war was about to begin, and Bobby Torino never lost wars. He eliminated the enemy completely. Chapter 4. The Hunter's Preparation. Bobby spent Friday evenings setting the stage for what would be the most important operation of his life. Unlike Afghanistan, where the enemy could be identified by their weapons and uniforms, this war required a different kind of precision. He started with Romano. Jimmy Chin's investigation had revealed that Vincent Romano operated from a legitimate-looking office in the North End, but his real business happened in the basement of his restaurant, Giuseppe's. Bobby had eaten there twice over the years, both times leaving with the uncomfortable feeling that he was being evaluated like a piece of meat. At 10 p.m., Bobby parked 3 blocks from Giuseppe's and walked through the narrow streets of Boston's Little Italy. Romano's burgundy Cadillac sat in the restaurant's private lot behind the building, right where Jimmy said it would be every Friday night. Bobby photographed the license plate and memorized the vehicle's exact position. From his pocket, he pulled a small device that Jimmy had acquired through channels that didn't officially exist. The GPS tracker was military-grade, designed to be undetectable for months. Bobby slipped it under Romano's rear bumper in less than 30 seconds, then walked away without looking back. Saturday morning brought phase 2. Bobby arrived at Emma's soccer game an hour early, scanning the parking lot until he spotted Dr. Holbrook's silver BMW. The doctor was apparently dating another divorcee with a daughter on Emma's team, maintaining his cover as a devoted family man while plotting murder. Bobby approached the BMW casually, as if heading to his own car. The GPS tracker went under Holbrook's bumper just as easily as Romano's. But this time, Bobby added something extra, a small listening device attached to the underside of the driver's door handle. Every conversation Holbrook had in his car would now be recorded and transmitted to a secure server. During the game, Bobby sat 2 rows behind Holbrook and his new girlfriend, close enough to hear their conversation. The doctor was charming, attentive, asking questions about the woman's daughter with what seemed like genuine interest. It was a perfect performance, and Bobby realized this wasn't Holbrook's first time playing the role of concerned stepfather-to-be. After the game, as Emma celebrated her team's victory with ice cream, Bobby's phone buzzed with the first recording from Holbrook's car. He listened through an earpiece while Emma talked excitedly about her goals. Told Cynthia the timeline has moved up, Holbrook was saying to someone on his phone. Romano wants the business sale completed by next Friday. What about the husband? The other voice was electronically distorted, probably Romano himself using a voice changer. Still no idea we were discovered. Cynthia says he's been completely focused on the daughter since the hospital incident. Good. Make sure he stays distracted. Once the papers are signed, you can handle the cleanup however you want. Cleanup. Bobby's jaw tightened. They were still planning to kill him, even after Emma's accident had exposed their original plan. That evening, Bobby called Mike. I need you to arrange a meeting with Romano. Tell him I'm ready to discuss a partnership on the waterfront project. Bobby, that's exactly what he's been waiting to hear for 3 years. He'll take the meeting. When? Tuesday night. Giuseppe's restaurant, after closing. Tell him I want privacy for our discussion. Mike was quiet for a moment. You're walking into the lion's den. No, Bobby said, watching Emma practice her violin through the living room window. I'm bringing the lion into mine. Sunday passed quietly. Cynthia returned from her spa weekend refreshed and seemingly guilt-free, cooking Bobby's favorite dinner and asking about Emma's recovery with what appeared to be genuine concern. She was good at compartmentalization, another sign that this wasn't her first betrayal. Monday brought the final preparation phase. Bobby visited 3 different locations around Boston, each serving a specific purpose in his plan. The first was a storage facility in Revere, where he rented a unit under a false name and stored equipment that Mike had acquired through their construction contacts. The second was a marina in Charlestown, where Bobby's old Army buddy Tony Greco kept a 40-foot fishing boat that had been modified for purposes that weren't strictly legal. The third was a farmhouse in New Hampshire that Bobby had bought years earlier as a weekend retreat, but never used. Each location would play a crucial role in what was coming. Tuesday morning, Jimmy Chun delivered the final intelligence report. "Romano's expecting you tonight," he said. "But he's also got 4 men positioned around the restaurant, and Holbrook's planning to be there too." "They're going to try to kill me tonight," Bobby said. "It wasn't a question. That's my assessment. Probably make it look like a robbery gone wrong." Bobby nodded. "What about Cynthia? She's supposed to be at her sister's house tonight, establishing an alibi. But I've got surveillance on her. If she deviates from the plan, you'll know immediately." That evening, Bobby kissed Emma goodbye and told her he'd be home late from a business meeting. She hugged him tight, still shaken from her hospital stay, but recovering more each day. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in the world." As Bobby drove toward the North End, he thought about the 22 years he'd spent building a life with Cynthia. The early years when money was tight, but they were happy. The joy of Emma's birth. The pride in watching his business grow from a single truck to an empire. All of it had been a lie. Cynthia had been waiting for the right moment to take everything, and she'd found partners who were willing to commit murder to make it happen. But Bobby Torino hadn't survived Afghanistan and built a multi-million-dollar business by being naive. He'd learned long ago that in war, the side that struck first and hardest usually won. Tonight, the war would begin in earnest. And by tomorrow morning, everyone who had threatened his daughter would understand why Bobby Torino never forgave and never forgot. Chapter 5. The Trap Closes. Bobby arrived at Giuseppe's at exactly 9 p.m., 15 minutes after the restaurant officially closed. The front windows were dark, but light glowed from the back office where Romano conducted his real business. Bobby parked in the public lot across the street, noting the positions of Romano's men just as Jimmy had described. One man sat in a dark sedan at the corner, another leaned against a building near the restaurant's rear entrance, and Bobby could see the silhouette of a third on the roof of the adjacent building. The fourth would be inside with Romano, standard protection protocol for a man who'd made as many enemies as Vincent Romano. Bobby straightened his tie and walked toward the restaurant's front door, projecting the image of a successful businessman arriving for a late meeting. He carried a leather briefcase containing financial documents that would make Romano believe the negotiation was legitimate. What Romano didn't know was that every one of those documents was fabricated, and Bobby had no intention of signing anything tonight. The front door opened before Bobby could knock. A thin man with dead eyes gestured him inside, without speaking. Bobby recognized him from surveillance photos. Carlo Benedetti, Romano's personal enforcer and rumored murderer. "Mr. Torino," Romano's voice carried from the back of the restaurant. Come. We have much to discuss." Bobby walked through the dimly lit dining room, past tables covered with white cloths and chairs stacked for the night. The smell of garlic and wine hung in the air, mixed with something else, fear, maybe, or anticipation. Romano sat behind a large desk in his office, a heavy-set man in an expensive suit with gold rings on both hands. Dr. Holbrook stood beside him, looking nervous but determined. A second enforcer, younger than Benedetti but equally dangerous-looking, lounged near the back door. "Vincent," Bobby said, extending his hand. "Thanks for agreeing to meet." "My pleasure, Bobby. You know Dr. Holbrook, of course." Bobby shook Holbrook's hand, squeezing just hard enough to make the doctor wince. "From the hospital. Good to see you again." "Yes. Well, I hope your daughter is recovering," Holbrook said, his voice carefully neutral. "She's doing much better. Funny thing about those pills, though. The pharmacy says they have no record of making that kind of mistake." Romano leaned forward slightly. "Pharmacy mistakes happen. The important thing is she's safe." "Absolutely." Bobby opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Shall we discuss business?" For the next 20 minutes, Bobby played his role perfectly. He listened to Romano's proposal for partnership on the waterfront development, nodded at the appropriate moments, and asked questions that made him seem eager but cautious. All the while, he was counting the men, noting their positions, and calculating distances. Holbrook mostly stayed quiet, but Bobby caught him checking his watch twice. They were working on a timeline. "So," Romano finally said, "are you ready to sign?" Bobby pretended to study the contract. "This partnership percentage seems low. I'm bringing all the political connections, all the established relationships with the city planning commission. But we're bringing the financing, Romano replied, and the protection that ensures projects run smoothly in this city. There it was, the threat delivered with a smile. I need to think about it, Bobby said, closing the folder. This is my life's work we're talking about. Romano's smile faded. I was hoping we could conclude our business tonight. Bobby, Holbrook spoke for the first time in 10 minutes. Vincent has been very generous with his offer. Some opportunities don't come twice. Bobby looked at the doctor with genuine curiosity. You know, Dr. Holbrook, I've been wondering about something. How exactly did you become involved in construction deals? Isn't your expertise in cardiology? The room went very quiet. Romano's eyes shifted to Holbrook, who was suddenly pale. I've always been interested in real estate investment, Holbrook said weakly. Right. Bobby stood up. Well, gentlemen, I'll need a few days to consider your proposal. My lawyer will want to review everything. Romano stood as well, his bulk making the movement seem threatening. Bobby, I think you're misunderstanding the situation here. Am I? This isn't really a negotiation. It's a transition plan. Your business is going to become our business, one way or another. Bobby nodded slowly. I see. And if I refuse, then you'll join the list of contractors who've had unfortunate accidents in this city. Bobby picked up his briefcase. Vincent, I think you've misunderstood something important about me. What's that? I'm not some local contractor you can intimidate. Bobby's voice was calm, almost conversational. I'm a man who spent 20 years killing people much more dangerous than you. The room exploded into motion. Benedetti reached for his gun, but Bobby had anticipated the movement. The briefcase swung in a perfect arc, catching Benedetti across the throat and dropping him to his knees. Bobby spun, grabbed Holbrook by the shirt, and slammed him against the wall before Romano could react. The pills you switched, Bobby said quietly, his forearm pressed against Holbrook's throat. They were meant for me, weren't they? I don't know what. Bobby pressed harder. My daughter almost died because of your incompetence. You put heart medication in her anxiety bottle, thinking you were going to give me a heart attack. Romano was shouting orders to his men, but Bobby had positioned himself so that Holbrook's body blocked any clear shot. The younger enforcer was moving to flank him, but Bobby had expected that too. Here's what's going to happen, Bobby continued, still speaking quietly while chaos erupted around him. You're going to tell Romano exactly how this plan was supposed to work. You're going to explain how my wife hired you to kill me and steal my business. Vincent, he's insane. Holbrook gasped. Bobby smiled. No, doctor. I'm just getting started. He released Holbrook and stepped back, pulling a small device from his pocket. With his thumb, he pressed a single button. What is that? Romano demanded. Insurance, Bobby said. Gentlemen, you've been broadcasting this entire conversation to the FBI. The lie was perfect. All three men froze, their minds racing through everything they'd said in the past 30 minutes. Romano had explicitly threatened Bobby's life. Holbrook had been caught in the lie about his involvement. They'd revealed enough to destroy them both. But Bobby wasn't done. Of course, he continued, there's always the possibility that the recording could disappear. These things happen with technology. Romano's eyes narrowed. What do you want? Bobby straightened his tie again. I want you to understand who you're dealing with. I want you to know that I know everything. About the murder plot, about Cynthia, about your plans for my business. He walked to the door, stepping over Benedetti, who was still gasping on the floor. I'll be in touch soon, Vincent. We'll discuss new terms for our relationship. Bobby left the restaurant without looking back, knowing that Romano wouldn't try to stop him. Not yet. The man needed time to think, to figure out what Bobby really knew and what he planned to do with the information. What Romano couldn't know was that Bobby had never intended to negotiate. This had been reconnaissance, a chance to look his enemies in the eye and let them know that war had been declared. Tomorrow, the real operation would begin. And unlike Romano and Holbrook, Bobby Torino had never lost a war. Chapter 6. The Reckoning Begins. Bobby drove home through the quiet streets of Belmont, his mind already shifting to the next phase of his plan. The meeting with Romano had served its purpose. His enemies now knew they were exposed, which would make them desperate and prone to mistakes. Cynthia's car was in the driveway when he arrived, though she was supposed to be at her sister's house. Bobby parked and checked his phone. Jimmy Chin had sent 3 messages in the past hour. Cynthia left her sister's at 8:47 p.m. She's at Holbrook's condo now. Romano's men are moving. They're scared. Bobby smiled. Fear made people predictable. He entered the house quietly and found Cynthia in the kitchen, pacing while talking on her phone. She ended the call quickly when she saw him. "How was your meeting?" she asked, her voice strained. "Productive. Romano and I came to an understanding." "Oh, what kind of understanding?" Bobby moved to the refrigerator and pulled out a beer, taking his time. The kind where everyone knows exactly where they stand. Cynthia's left eye twitched. "Bobby, I need to tell you something. About the divorce papers you filed? I already know." Her face went white. "How did you? Or about Dr. Holbrook?" "I know about that too." Cynthia sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "Bobby, I can explain. Can you explain why Emma almost died?" "That was an accident. The pharmacy made a mistake with her prescription." Bobby set his beer down and walked to where she sat. "Cynthia, I know about the digoxin. I know it was meant for me. I know about Romano and the plan to sell my business." Tears started flowing down her cheeks, but Bobby felt nothing. The woman he'd loved for 22 years had tried to murder him and had nearly killed their daughter in the process. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," she whispered. "Emma wasn't supposed to take those pills. But I was." Cynthia nodded, still crying. "Trevor said it would be painless. Like a heart attack. You've been working so hard, so stressed. And then you'd sell everything to Romano and disappear with your new boyfriend. We just wanted to start over. You've been distant for years, Bobby. Always working, always building something bigger. I felt like I didn't exist anymore." Bobby knelt down so they were eye level. "So you decided to kill me." "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that." His voice was quiet, controlled. "You tried to murder me, and you almost killed our daughter instead." Cynthia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it instinctively, and Bobby saw the name on the screen. "Trevor." "Answer it," Bobby said. "What?" "Answer the phone, Cynthia. Put it on speaker." With shaking hands, she accepted the call and activated the speaker function. "Cynthia." "Thank God." Holbrook's voice was panicked. "We have a problem. He knows everything." "Trevor, Bobby's here." "What? Why are you at the house?" "You're supposed to be at your sister's." Bobby took the phone from Cynthia's hand. "Hello, Trevor." The silence stretched for nearly 10 seconds. "Bobby." Holbrook's voice was carefully controlled now. "I think there's been some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding. You tried to poison me with heart medication. You almost killed my daughter. You've been planning to steal my business and my life." "That's not." "I was at Giuseppe's tonight, Trevor. Vincent and I had a long talk. He's very disappointed in how you've handled things." Another silence. "Then, what do you want?" "I want you to pack a bag and meet me at the Charlestown Marina in 1 hour. Pier 17. Come alone." "I'm not going anywhere." "Trevor, you have two choices. You can meet me at the marina, or I can call Detective Kowalski and tell him I have evidence that you and my wife conspired to murder me using pills you prescribed illegally." Bobby could hear Holbrook breathing heavily through the phone. "You can't prove any of that. I can prove all of it. I have recordings, financial records, surveillance footage. The only question is whether you want to resolve this privately or publicly." "What about Romano?" "Vincent and I are going to have our own conversation. Right now, I'm focused on you." After another long pause, Holbrook agreed to the meeting. Bobby ended the call and turned back to Cynthia, who was staring at him with something between fear and recognition. "I've never seen you like this," she said quietly. "You've never tried to kill me before. What are you going to do?" Bobby finished his beer and set the empty bottle on the counter. "I'm going to make sure you understand the consequences of your choices." He walked toward the door, then turned back. "Cynthia, you need to know something. I spent 20 years in the army learning how to eliminate threats to the people I protect. Tonight, you became a threat to Emma." "Bobby, please. I'll be back before morning. Pack whatever you can carry. When I return, I don't want to find you here." "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem anymore." Bobby left his wife crying at the kitchen table and drove toward Charlestown. The marina was dark except for security lights that cast long shadows between the piers. Bobby parked near Pier 17 and walked to where Tony Greco's boat was moored. Tony was waiting for him, a stocky man with graying hair and arms covered in military tattoos. They'd served together in Afghanistan and had saved each other's lives more than once. "You sure about this, Bobby?" "Someone tried to kill my daughter, Tony. They were going to steal everything I've built and hand it over to Romano." Tony nodded. "What do you need?" "A conversation with Dr. Holbrook. Somewhere private where we won't be interrupted. How private? Bobby looked out at the dark water of Boston Harbor. Private enough that he understands this isn't a negotiation. Holbrook arrived 20 minutes later, driving his BMW and looking like a man walking to his execution. Bobby watched from the shadows as the doctor parked and walked nervously toward Pier 17. "Dr. Holbrook," Bobby called out. "Over here." Holbrook approached slowly, his expensive shoes clicking on the wooden pier. "Bobby, we can work this out. Whatever you think you know." "I know everything, Trevor. The question is what you're going to do to make it right." "What do you want? Money? I can transfer." Bobby stepped closer. "I want you to understand something very clearly. You tried to murder me. You almost killed my 16-year-old daughter. And you thought you were going to walk away with my wife and half my fortune. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. But it did happen. And now you're going to pay for it." Tony appeared from behind a shipping container, moving silently despite his size. Holbrook spun around, finally understanding that he'd walked into a trap. "Bobby, please, we can." "No," Bobby said quietly. "We can't." The reckoning had begun, and Dr. Trevor Holbrook was about to learn what happened when you threatened Bobby Torino's family. Some lessons, Bobby had learned long ago, could only be taught once. Chapter 7. The Price of Betrayal. Dr. Trevor Holbrook found himself on Tony Greco's boat 20 minutes later, his hands zip-tied behind his back and his expensive suit torn from the struggle on the pier. Bobby sat across from him in the boat's small cabin while Tony piloted them into the dark waters of Boston Harbor. "Where are you taking me?" Holbrook's voice was high with panic. "Somewhere we can have an honest conversation," Bobby replied. He pulled out a waterproof bag containing Holbrook's phone, wallet, and keys. "Let's start with your phone password." "I'm not giving you." Tony appeared in the doorway holding a pair of bolt cutters. "Doc, my friend here asked you nicely." Holbrook's eyes widened as he understood his situation. 7311, he whispered. Bobby unlocked the phone and began scrolling through text messages. "Interesting. You and Cynthia have been planning this since January. Bobby's insurance policy will set us up for life. Romano's offering $3 million for a quick sale. The digoxin should work within 72 hours. He looked up at Holbrook. "You really thought you were smart, didn't you?" "It wasn't my idea. Cynthia approached me. She said you were abusive, that she was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That I'd find out she was stealing from me." Holbrook's confusion was genuine. "Stealing?" Bobby showed him bank records on the phone. $47,000 in cash deposits over 2 months. "Money you gave her. Where did you get that much cash, Trevor?" I don't understand." "Cynthia said she needed money for lawyers, for protection from you." "The money came from Romano, didn't it? Payment for delivering my business to him." "No, that money was mine. I sold some investments." Bobby backhanded him across the face, the sound sharp in the small cabin. "Stop lying. I know about Romano's shell companies. I know about Meridian Development. You were the go-between, weren't you?" Holbrook's nose was bleeding now. "You can't prove any of this. And even if you could, kidnapping me isn't going to solve your problems." "Who said I kidnapped you?" Bobby showed him the phone again. "According to your text messages, you're meeting a patient's family about a medical emergency. You told your answering service you'd be unavailable until morning." The boat's engine shifted to idle. Tony called down from the wheelhouse. "We're here, Bobby." Bobby climbed up to the deck and saw they were anchored in a secluded cove near Thompson Island, far from any boat traffic or curious observers. The lights of Boston glowed in the distance, but out here they were completely alone. Tony joined them in the cabin, carrying a toolbox that clinked ominously when he set it down. "Dr. Holbrook," Bobby said, settling back into his chair, "I'm going to tell you exactly what's going to happen. First, you're going to transfer every penny of Romano's money back to its original accounts. Second, you're going to write out a detailed confession about the murder plot. Third, you're going to disappear from Boston and never contact my wife or daughter again." "And if I refuse?" Bobby nodded to Tony, who opened the toolbox and pulled out a pair of surgical pliers. Tony here spent 6 years as a combat medic. He knows exactly how much pain the human body can endure before permanent damage occurs. Holbrook's face went gray. "You can't do this. I'm a doctor. People will look for me. Actually, people are already looking for you." Bobby held up a newspaper. Tomorrow's headline: "Prominent cardiologist vanishes after financial scandal." "Seems you've been stealing from the hospital's charity fund and gambling the money away. That's not true. It will be by morning. Jimmy Chun is very good at creating evidence. By the time your body is found, if it's ever found, everyone will believe you killed yourself rather than face the shame of exposure. Tony tested the pliers, making them snap loudly. Should I start with the fingers, Bobby? Or maybe the toes? Wait. Holbrook was hyperventilating now. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't hurt me. Bobby pulled out a laptop computer. Banking website is already loaded. Start transferring. For the next hour, Bobby watched as Holbrook systematically returned every payment he'd received from Romano. Nearly $200,000 moved back to various accounts, erasing the financial trail of the conspiracy. Now the confession, Bobby said, opening a legal pad. Holbrook wrote out everything. The original murder plan, Romano's involvement, Cynthia's role in gathering intelligence about Bobby's business. His handwriting shook, but every detail was clear and comprehensive. There's one more thing, Bobby said when Holbrook finished writing. You're going to call Romano and tell him the plan is moving forward. Tell him I've agreed to sell, and we're meeting tomorrow night to finalize everything. He'll know something's wrong. Then you better be convincing. Because if Romano doesn't believe you, Tony's going to start removing pieces of you until your story improves. Holbrook made the call, his voice steady despite the circumstances. He told Romano that Bobby had been convinced by their meeting at Giuseppe's and was ready to sign the papers. They arranged to meet at Romano's warehouse in East Boston the following evening. Perfect, Bobby said when the call ended. Romano thinks he's won. He'll be relaxed, confident, maybe even bring fewer guards than usual. What happens to me now? Holbrook asked. Bobby studied him for a long moment. That depends on how well you follow instructions. You're going to drive to Logan Airport and take the first flight to anywhere that isn't Boston. You're going to start a new life somewhere far away, and you're never going to contact anyone from your old life again. And if I refuse, then Tony here is going to feed you to the lobsters, piece by piece. Holbrook looked into Bobby's eyes and saw no mercy, no hesitation. This wasn't a bluff or an empty threat. This was a man who had killed before and would kill again to protect what was his. I'll disappear, he whispered. Good choice. An hour later, they were back at the marina. Bobby watched as Holbrook drove away, knowing the doctor would keep his word. Men like Holbrook were cowards at heart. They could plot and scheme in the shadows, but when confronted with real consequences, they folded immediately. Bobby called Jimmy Chun as he drove home. Holbrook's handled. How are we looking for tomorrow night? Romano's expecting you at the warehouse at 9 p.m. I've got blueprints, security camera locations, everything you need. What about the other problem? Your wife checked into the Marriott downtown 2 hours ago. She used her credit card, so she's not trying to hide. Bobby almost felt sorry for Cynthia. She still didn't understand what was coming. She thought this was about divorce and adultery, property division, and custody arrangements. She had no idea that Bobby Torino was about to teach her the same lesson he'd taught Dr. Holbrook. When you threatened his family, you paid a price that would haunt you for the rest of your life. Tomorrow night, Vincent Romano would learn that lesson too. And after that, Bobby's war would finally be over. Chapter 8, The Final Gambit. Bobby spent Friday morning at Emma's school, watching her perform in the spring concert. She played violin in a Mozart piece, her face serious with concentration, completely unaware that her father was planning to eliminate the last threats to their family that evening. After the concert, Bobby took Emma to lunch at her favorite restaurant. Dad, you seem different lately, Emma said as they shared a plate of nachos. Different how? I don't know. Calmer, maybe? Like you're not worried about work anymore. Bobby smiled. I've been making some changes. Simplifying things. Good. Mom says you work too much. What else does Mom say? Emma looked uncomfortable. She says you guys might get divorced. Is that true? Bobby chose his words carefully. Your mother and I are having some problems, sweetheart. But whatever happens between us, nothing changes how much I love you. Will I still live with you? Always. No matter what happens, you and I are a team. That afternoon, Bobby made his final preparations. He met Mike at the construction office to review the evening's plan one last time. You sure about this? Mike asked, spreading blueprints across Bobby's desk. Romano's going to have at least 6 men with him. I'm counting on it. The more people who witness what happens, the clearer the message becomes. And you're really going to walk in there alone? Bobby smiled. I won't be alone. I'll have the best backup in the world. At 6 p.m., Bobby drove to the warehouse district in East Boston. Romano's operation occupied a converted shipping facility near the harbor, isolated enough for privacy, but close enough to the city for convenience. Bobby parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, carrying the same briefcase he'd brought to Giuseppe's. Jimmy Chin's voice crackled through his earpiece. 6 men visible on thermal imaging. Romano's in the main office on the 2nd floor. 2 guards at the front entrance, 1 on the loading dock, 1 roving patrol, 2 with Romano. Copy that. Mike, you in position? We're ready, brother. Bobby walked to the front entrance, where 2 men in expensive suits waited beside a black sedan. They searched him professionally, but found only business documents and a pen. Mr. Torino, one of them said. Mr. Romano is waiting upstairs. The warehouse floor was mostly empty except for some shipping containers and construction equipment. Bobby's footsteps echoed as he climbed the metal stairs to Romano's office, a glass-walled space overlooking the work floor. Romano sat behind a massive desk, flanked by 2 enforcers Bobby didn't recognize. A stack of legal documents waited on the desk, along with an expensive bottle of scotch and 3 glasses. Bobby, Romano stood with open arms. Come in, come in. Tonight we celebrate our new partnership. Vincent, good to see you again. Please sit. Have a drink. We have much to celebrate. Bobby accepted a glass of scotch, but didn't drink. I have to say, Vincent, I'm impressed by your patience. Most men in your position would have acted impulsively after our conversation Tuesday night. Romano's smile faltered slightly. I don't know what you mean. Of course you do. You've been planning to steal my business for months. The murder plot, the involvement with my wife, the financial arrangements, very sophisticated. The 2 enforcers shifted closer, but Romano waved them back. Bobby, I think you're confused. Am I? Let me tell you what I think happened. Bobby opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. You approached Dr. Holbrook months ago, knowing he was treating my daughter. You offered him money to help eliminate me and create an opportunity to acquire my business cheaply. That's ridiculous. Holbrook seduced my wife and convinced her to gather intelligence about my operations. Together, they planned to poison me with heart medication, make it look like a stress-induced heart attack. Romano's face was stone now. Even if that were true, you can't prove any of it. Bobby smiled. Actually, I can. He pulled out a digital recorder and pressed play. Romano's own voice filled the office. Once the papers are signed, you can handle the cleanup however you want. The recording continued for several minutes, capturing Romano's explicit instructions about killing Bobby and disposing of evidence. By the time it finished, Romano's face was flushed with anger. That recording is inadmissible, Romano said. Illegally obtained. I'm not planning to use it in court, Vincent. Bobby stood and walked to the window overlooking the warehouse floor. Below, he could see the 2 guards at the front entrance, just as Jimmy had described. You know what I learned in Afghanistan? Bobby continued. The enemy always makes the same mistake. They think violence is about anger, about losing control. But real violence, effective violence, is about precision. Romano nodded to his men, who began reaching for their weapons. Bobby didn't seem to notice. For example, Bobby said, you have 6 men here tonight. You think that gives you an advantage. It does give me an advantage. Does it? Bobby checked his watch. It's 9:15 p.m. Let me ask you something, Vincent. When did you last hear from your guards downstairs? Romano's confidence wavered. He pulled out his phone and speed-dialed a number. No answer. He tried another number, then another. Problem with your security? Bobby asked. What did you do? I brought better security than you did. The lights in the warehouse suddenly went out, plunging everything into darkness except for the emergency lighting. Through the office windows, Bobby could see figures moving across the warehouse floor, shadows with military precision, advancing toward the stairs. You see, Vincent, you made a fundamental error in judgment. You thought you were dealing with a local contractor who could be intimidated or eliminated like any other business rival. Romano's men had their guns out now, but they were facing the wrong direction, focused on Bobby instead of the real threat approaching from below. But I'm not a contractor, Bobby continued, his voice calm in the darkness. I'm a soldier, and I brought my unit with me. The office door exploded inward. Mike Vasquez entered first, followed by Tony Greco and 4 other men Bobby had served with in Afghanistan. All of them wore black tactical gear, and carried military-grade weapons. Romano's enforcers tried to react, but they were facing trained killers who had survived multiple combat tours. The fight was over in seconds. "Vincent Romano," Bobby said as Mike zip-tied Romano's hands behind his back, "you're under citizen's arrest for conspiracy to commit murder." "You can't do this." "Actually, I can. You see, while you were planning to kill me, I was documenting everything. Financial records, recorded conversations, witness statements from Dr. Holbrook. Everything the FBI needs to put you away for life." Bobby pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Detective Kowalski, this is Bobby Torino. I have Vincent Romano and evidence of his conspiracy to commit murder. We're at his warehouse in East Boston." As they waited for the police to arrive, Bobby sat in Romano's chair and looked out at his former enemies, now tied up and facing federal charges. "There's one more thing you should know, Vincent," Bobby said. "This was never about business. This was about my daughter. You see, when you tried to kill me, you almost killed her instead. And I don't forgive people who threaten my family." Romano stared at him with a mixture of hatred and fear. "This isn't over." Bobby smiled. "Yes, it is." 20 minutes later, Detective Kowalski arrived with a team of federal agents. By midnight, Romano and his entire organization were in custody, charged with conspiracy, attempted murder, and a dozen other federal crimes. Bobby's war was finally over, but he still had one last conversation to have. Chapter 9, The Reckoning's End. Bobby found Cynthia at the Marriott Hotel bar at 1 a.m., drinking wine alone and staring at her phone. She looked up when he approached, and he saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before, genuine fear. "Hello, Cynthia." "Bobby." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I heard about Romano on the news. And Trevor, they're saying he disappeared." Bobby sat across from her in the empty lounge. "Trevor's alive. He's starting a new life somewhere far from Boston. As for Romano, he'll be spending the rest of his life in federal prison." "And me?" Bobby studied his wife of 22 years. Even now, even after everything, part of him remembered the young woman he'd fallen in love with. But that woman had died the moment she decided to murder him. "That depends on you," he said finally. "What do you mean?" Bobby pulled out a legal document and placed it on the table between them. "This is a settlement agreement. You'll get $2 million and the house in Vermont. In exchange, you'll give up all claims to my business, our home in Belmont, and any future alimony." Cynthia stared at the papers. $2 million? "Bobby, I'm entitled to half of everything. You're entitled to nothing. You tried to murder me, Cynthia. You almost killed our daughter. I could have you arrested right now. You can't prove." Bobby placed a digital recorder on the table. "This contains your confession from last night. You admitted to the entire murder plot." Cynthia's face went white. "That was a private conversation between husband and wife. Massachusetts is a one-party consent state. I can record any conversation I'm part of." Bobby leaned forward. "But here's what I'm really offering you. The chance to walk away with something instead of nothing. What about Emma? Emma will live with me. You can have supervised visitation every other weekend, assuming you stay clean and sober." Tears were flowing down Cynthia's cheeks now. "Bobby, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can." "No." His voice was final. "You made your choice when you decided to kill me. Now you live with the consequences. I never wanted you dead. I just wanted out. Trevor convinced me it was the only way." "Trevor convinced you? Or did you convince yourself?" Bobby stood up. "It doesn't matter anymore. Sign the papers, Cynthia. Take the money and start over somewhere else." "And if I refuse?" Bobby's smile was cold. "Then Detective Kowalski gets the recording of your confession, along with evidence of your role in the conspiracy. You'll be charged as an accessory to attempted murder and spend the next 20 years in prison." Cynthia stared at the settlement agreement for a long time. Finally, she picked up the pen and signed her name. "I want you to know something," she said as Bobby collected the papers. "I did love you once. I know. That's the only reason you're walking out of here instead of being carried out." Bobby left his ex-wife crying at the hotel bar and drove home to Belmont. The house was quiet, Emma asleep upstairs, unaware that her family had been permanently changed. In his study, Bobby poured himself a bourbon and sat behind his desk, looking out at the garden Cynthia had spent years cultivating. By tomorrow, she'd be gone, and he'd have to explain to Emma why her mother wouldn't be coming home. His phone buzzed with a text from Mike. "It's over, brother. Romano and his entire crew are looking at life sentences. You did it. Bobby smiled. In Afghanistan, mission success was measured by objectives achieved and threats eliminated. By that standard, this operation had been a complete victory. Vincent Romano would never threaten anyone again. Dr. Trevor Holbrook had vanished into exile, his medical license revoked, and his reputation destroyed. Cynthia was effectively banished from their lives, left with enough money to survive, but stripped of everything else she'd tried to steal. Most importantly, Emma was safe. She would grow up knowing that her father would always protect her, no matter the cost. 6 months later, Bobby stood in the same study, watching Emma practice violin through the window. The divorce had been finalized, Romano's trial had ended with a life sentence, and Bobby's business was stronger than ever. Word had spread through Boston's criminal underworld about what happened to people who threatened Bobby Torino's family. Nobody would ever make that mistake again. Emma knocked on his door and entered carrying a cup of hot chocolate. "Dad, I have something to ask you." "What is it, sweetheart?" "Mom called today. She wants me to visit her in California." Bobby set down his papers. Cynthia had moved to San Diego with her settlement money, as far from Boston as she could get while staying in the United States. This was the first time she tried to contact Emma directly. "What did you tell her?" "I said I'd think about it. But honestly, Dad, I don't really want to see her." "Why not?" Emma was quiet for a moment. "Because I remember that night at the hospital. I remember how scared you were, how angry you got when the police said someone had switched my pills. And I remember how Mom acted, like she was surprised, but not really surprised, you know." Bobby felt a surge of pride. His daughter was smarter than he'd given her credit for. "You don't have to see her if you don't want to," he said. "But Emma, I want you to understand something. Your mother made some very bad choices, but that doesn't mean you can't love her or forgive her someday. Can you forgive her?" Bobby thought about that question for a long time. "No," he said finally. "I can't. But you're different than me, sweetheart. You don't have to carry the same anger I do." Emma nodded, understanding more than most 16-year-olds would. "Dad, can I ask you something else?" "Anything. Are you happy? I mean really happy." Bobby looked around his study, at the family photos that now showed just him and Emma, at the business awards that represented years of hard work and sacrifice. He thought about the enemies he'd eliminated, the threats he'd neutralized, the life he'd built and protected. "Yes," he said, "I'm happy." And for the first time in years, Bobby Torino meant it. He'd learned long ago that happiness wasn't about forgiveness or second chances. It was about protecting the people you loved and eliminating the people who threatened them. Some men were builders. Some men were destroyers. Bobby Torino was both, and that made him exactly who he needed to be. The war was over. He had won. And unlike his enemies, Bobby Torino never forgot the cost of crossing him.